morning of May 20th, 1941, dawned over Crete like any other in the Mediterranean. Blue sky, white sun, olive trees, and silence before the storm. Then came the shadows. Thousands of parachutes opened over the island, carrying Hitler's elite. The Fallschirmjäger, the German paratroopers who had already conquered Norway and Holland. They fell with the arrogance of success and the fragility of silk. What awaited them was a hard truth written in blood and distance. When the first waves hit the ground near Malem and Heraklion, the problem announced itself at once. The Fallschirmjäger were armed with MP-38 and MP-40 submachine guns, sleek and modern in appearance, but firing pistol rounds that could not reach beyond 100 meters with authority. Their heavier support, MG-34 machine guns and 81mm mortars, dropped separately in canisters, often hundreds of meters away. On the open plains and rocky hillsides of Crete, paratroopers found themselves outgunned by British and New Zealand troops armed with Enfield rifles and Bren guns. Many died crawling toward containers that never opened. Others fought with pistols and grenades, improvising defences with courage where logistics had failed them. The island fell, but at a cost so severe that Hitler forbade another major airborne assault for the rest of the war. The victory on Crete was, paradoxically, the death of large-scale German airborne operations. Yet, in the aftermath, German planners began to study not the failure of men, but the failure of their weapons. From Crete's stony fields emerged a question that would haunt the offices of Berlin and Solingen. How does a paratrooper fight the minute he lands, without waiting for heavy weapons to find him? In the summer of 1941, a directive circulated within the Luftwaffe's procurement chain. It carried the plain but revolutionary phrase, "A self-loading rifle for parachute troops capable of automatic fire with the 7.92mm cartridge." To ordinary ordnance officers, the demand was absurd. The 7.92 by 57mm Mauser round was the full power cartridge of the German infantry rifle and machine gun, long, heavy, and violent in recoil. To make a portable automatic rifle that could fire it controllably seemed like asking a man to hold a lightning bolt without getting burned. The letter eventually landed on the desk of Louis Stange, a 39-year-old weapons designer at Rheinmetall-Borsig in Solingen. Stange had already worked on aircraft cannon and was known for his analytical precision and disregard for orthodoxy. His assignment? Design a rifle for men who would fall from the sky. The problem formed an impossible triangle in Stange's notebook. Full power cartridge, the Mauser round to penetrate at range. Controllable automatic fire, a burst weapon, not a machine gun. Portability, under 10 pounds, short enough to jump with. 3 points, he told a colleague, but we may only hold 2. Stange began to sketch. His early drafts were long and lean, drawn around the central idea that recoil must travel straight back, not up. He realized that the old habit of dropping the rifle's stock below the barrel, as with the Mauser 98 or Karabiner 98K, caused the muzzle to rise violently in automatic fire. The solution was geometry, not brute force. If the stock aligned directly with the bore, recoil would push back into the shoulder, not lever the muzzle skyward. This inline configuration would become the defining spine of his new rifle, and the foundation of every modern assault weapon that followed. By autumn 1941, the design began to solidify. Stange's weapon was to be gas-operated, drawing a portion of propellant gases through a port near the muzzle to cycle a short-stroke piston and bolt assembly. It would feature a side-mounted magazine, so that soldiers could reload while prone and the weapon could lie flat against the ground. The bolt locked via a tilting mechanism, compact and strong. Every feature was a deliberate compromise between engineering necessity and combat reality. The rifle would fire in semi-automatic for precision and full automatic when suppression was needed. But full auto with a closed bolt risked overheating and cook-offs, while open bolt firing ruined first shot accuracy. Stange's solution was genius. The rifle fired from a closed bolt in semi-auto mode for accuracy, and from an open bolt in full auto for safety and cooling. No one had ever done this before, a hybrid fire control system decades ahead of its time. To manage the recoil of the powerful Mauser cartridge, Stange equipped the muzzle with a multi-baffle brake that redirected gases sideways, cutting climb dramatically. Testers complained that it deafened anyone standing nearby, but in prone firing positions it kept the gun level. The weapon also included a folding bipod, a spike bayonet, and mountings for an optical sight. Evidence that the Fallschirmjäger were expected to fight not as raiders, but as an elite rifle force. By early 1942, prototypes emerged under the name Fallschirmjägergewehr 42, FG42, literally Paratrooper Rifle Model 42. It was long and slender, with an almost futuristic silhouette. The straight-line stock, high-mounted sights, and side magazine made it look more like a machine from the future than a weapon of its time. Early versions, known later as the Type E or Type Y, weighed about 4.2 kilograms and could fire 750 rounds per minute, too fast, too fierce, yet undeniably effective. At the testing grounds in Kummersdorf, engineers and paratroopers gathered to see if Stange's dream would hold together. On the range, the rifle's recoil was firm but linear, its bursts tight, its first shot almost surgically accurate. Controllable, one report read, provided the shooter is well trained. For a paratrooper trained to land under fire, crawl through dirt and fight immediately, this was the miracle they had asked for in Crete. A single man could now carry a weapon that bridged the gap between rifle and machine gun. Still, the rifle had flaws. Its right-side magazine made the weapon awkward in confined spaces. The high sight line took getting used to. The bipod, too close to the muzzle, heated and bent. The muzzle blast was punishing, but the basic geometry, the line of recoil, the balance, the control, was perfect. The Luftwaffe's Ordnance Office approved a limited pre-series run. Rheinmetall began producing small batches for field testing by elite Fallschirmjäger units. By late 1942, the first crates were ready. Each rifle represented not just a weapon, but a concept, a manifesto of lessons learned from Crete. The FG-42 would not enter full production until the following year, but its existence already changed how military planners thought about infantry firepower. For the first time, a paratrooper's weapon could perform nearly every battlefield task: rifle, light machine gun, and marksman's weapon in one. From May 1941's bitter landings on Crete to October 1942's first Solingen prototypes, the Fallschirmjäger had forced an evolution. In the aftermath of one of the bloodiest airborne assaults in history, the German war machine had reimagined what a rifle could be, a compact, controllable automatic weapon that didn't wait for the rest of the army to arrive. The FG-42 was not just a rifle. It was a philosophy made of steel. That firepower should fit the man who carries it, not the other way around. From that idea, the modern assault rifle was born. Winter fog hung over Kummersdorf when the new rifle first barked, a flat, contemptuous sound that pushed more than it kicked. The men behind it glanced at one another with the half-smile soldiers wear when a machine behaves better than its reputation. Here it was at last, the Fallschirmjägergewehr 42, an answer forged from an equation that ought not to balance: a full-power cartridge, automatic fire you could actually steer, and a package light and short enough to jump with. On paper, nonsense. In the hands, a problem solved by geometry. The first truth was a straight line. Old rifles bent the stock down below the bore, turning recoil into a lever that pried the muzzle skyward. The FG-42 simply refused to give the force a lever. Its inline stock ran directly behind the barrel, so the impulse drove straight into the shoulder. No hinge, no arc, no flourish, just a shove that stayed a shove. You could see it in slow motion, sights settled, not snatched. The muzzle wrote a dash, not a parenthesis. That line demanded another heresy, a high sight line. If the comb stayed straight and high to catch the bore, then the sights had to ride above everything, front tower proud, rear aperture lifted, so the shooter's eye met them without craning. The bonus arrived unadvertised, room for optics. A paratrooper's rifle that accepted glass without contortions was closer to tomorrow than anyone admitted aloud in 1943. At the muzzle, physics staged their own revolt. The Mauser cartridge hurled a heavy bullet and a fistful of gas. Left ungoverned, both would yank the rifle around like a bad dance partner. The multi-baffle brake caught that fist and threw it sideways, peeling recoil into the air before it could right itself into the shooter. The price, blast that slapped the man to the right, was real, but so was the reward. Short 2- and 3-round strings that stayed on a man-sized target at honest fighting distances. Gas tapped near the front did the rude work of cycling. Stange made the gas cylinder easy to service and the regulator adjustable, so a fouled day or a cold morning did not become a stoppage sermon. The folding bipod admitted the battlefield's truth. Prone is where you live if you plan to keep living. Early legs clung too near the muzzle and heated like stove irons. Later placements crept back along the barrel where heat, leverage, and sanity met. The box that fed the beast sat on the right side, a 20-round magazine angled into the receiver so a man in the dirt could reload without lifting his life into the line of fire. It kept the left cheek clean and let the rifle lie low on a wall, but it taught the hands a new drill and picked needless fights with door frames. The spike bayonet tucked beneath the barrel looked like a relic until a stairwell or trench made it doctrine. This was not a showpiece, it was a paratrooper's survival kit, threaded into one length of steel. Then came the party trick, the kind designers call a mechanism and infantrymen call mercy. Precision wants a quiet chamber and a locked bolt. Sustained fire wants air and safety. The FG-42 gave both. In semi-automatic, it fired from a closed bolt, the breech sealed, the trigger crisp, the first shot surgical. Flip to full automatic, and the rifle ran open bolt, the carrier parked to the rear until the trigger loosed it, fresh air washing the chamber between bursts. One trigger, two behaviours, heat and accuracy housed under the same roof without either burning the other down. All of it reduced to math a soldier could feel. Recoil is a force acting at a distance from a pivot. Torque is tau equals F times D. Stange shortened D to almost nothing by stacking bore, stock and shoulder. No distance, no torque, no climb. The brake trimmed F, the gas system timed it, the stock absorbed it, and the sights sat where an eye could keep them honest. What remained was controllable impulse, physics reorganized into manners. The trials wrote their footnotes in frost and carbon. Praises first shot hit speed that felt like cheating, barrier penetration that turned sandbags into rumour, a bipod that made one rifle pretend to be two. Grievances followed, terse and fair. The right side magazine dragged on ruins and hung weight on the wrong shoulder during long crawls. The handguard warmed from reminder to admonition. The brake's sidewash punished neighbours. The early bipod wandered under recoil and the high sights made snapshooters relearn their cheek. None of it disqualified the idea, all of it shaped the revision. And revise they did. The earliest pre-series, Type E/Type Y rifles, were the long, lean radicals, lighter, faster, with a raked pistol grip and bipod clamped near the muzzle, their bolts cycling at a rate that bordered on the exuberant. In the later pattern, Type G/Type 2, mass shifted and manners improved. The grip stood more vertical. The buttstock grew sturdier and friendlier to human shoulders. The bipod migrated rearward for stability. The muzzle device evolved for better control. Internal weights and regulator tweaks tempered the cyclic rate, so bursts spoke in syllables, not babble. Nothing essential changed. Everything important matured. The rifle did not apologize for what it was, a full-power select-fire arm, but it learned to pace itself like a professional. By spring 1943, the FG-42 had crossed the line from prototype to partner. It would never be common, war and industry would see to that. But the men who carried it out of drop zones and into streets discovered that a rifle can be built around the human instead of the legend. Draw a straight line through recoil, put the sights where the head lives, shape gas and fire to match the job, and dare to make a single weapon do three. On the bench, it was audacity. On the range, it was evidence. In the hands, it was a rifle that shouldn't exist, except that it did, and nothing after it would forget how. When the first Fallschirmjägergewehr 42 rifles reached combat units in late 1943, they were more rumour than weapon, a handful per company, carried by men who had waited 2 years for a rifle that could keep up with their courage. Italy would be the proving ground, and the paratroopers were its witnesses. The earliest documented use came during the Gran Sasso raid on September 12, 1943, the audacious glider assault that freed Benito Mussolini from his mountaintop prison. Though most rescuers carried MP-44s, the FG-42 appeared in photographs afterward, cradled by paratroopers like an artifact from the future. It was the first public glimpse of a weapon born from Crete's lessons, long, angular, unmistakably modern. By winter, the rifle was in the field for real. At Monte Cassino, paratroopers dug into shattered stone and olive groves, fighting against British and New Zealand troops who outnumbered them 5-1. Reports from the 2nd Fallschirmjäger Division describe small detachments armed with a mix of rifles, submachine guns, and a few of the new FG-42s. A single gun could dominate a street or staircase. 2 men with FG-42s on bipods, one with a machine gun, formed a defensive triangle that could hold for hours. The rifle's strengths were immediate. The first shot came fast and true, no muzzle climb, no hesitation. Veterans who had fought with Mausers marvelled at how easily the FG-42 delivered its first round exactly where the sights were placed. The full-power 7.92 by 57mm cartridge made a mockery of cover. Sandbags, wooden shutters, even brick could not stop it. Allied soldiers later remarked that the Germans seemed to hit with the precision of snipers. Indeed, many FG-42s carried 4 times ZF-4 scopes, turning ordinary riflemen into designated marksmen. But the rifle's brilliance carried shadows. Its side-mounted magazine, ideal for prone firing, caught on door frames and rubble. The right side weight made the gun list slightly in the hands, a subtle annoyance during long patrols. After several magazines in quick succession, the slim barrel heated fiercely. Soldiers switched to full auto only when survival demanded it. The muzzle brake, though vital for recoil control, blasted concussion sideways, stunning anyone within a metre. "The man to your right is your enemy," one instructor joked grimly during training. The rifle's dual-mode bolt system, closed for single fire, open for automatic, proved its worth at Cassino. The closed bolt precision allowed accurate single shots at long range, while open bolt firing prevented heat build-up during suppression. In the ruins of the abbey, this feature saved barrels and lives alike. Mechanics reported that FG-42 barrels lasted twice as long as expected in sustained use, a rarity in the desperate months of 1944. Doctrine began to adapt. Instead of assigning the FG-42 as a standard rifle, commanders treated it as a multi-role weapon, marksman's tool, light automatic rifle, and emergency machine gun in one. A company might receive a dozen, 1 per squad leader or for special missions. The Fallschirmjäger quickly built tactics around it. A 2-man cell with an FG-42 could cover the same ground once requiring a full MG team. When ammunition ran low, its semi-automatic mode conserved rounds without losing tempo. As the war moved north into Normandy, Allied intelligence finally catalogued the rifle properly. Captured examples astonished examiners at the British Small Arms School. "A hybrid unlike any other," one report read. The weapon combines the rate of fire of a light machine gun with the precision of a self-loading rifle. Its recoil characteristics are extraordinary. The FG-42 never existed in numbers large enough to change battles, but it transformed minds. In the shattered towns of Italy and the hedgerows of France, paratroopers learned that firepower could be personal, that one disciplined man with a well-designed weapon could shape a fight as surely as a machine gun crew. By the spring of 1944, the Fallschirmjäger no longer spoke of the FG-42 as an experiment. They spoke of it the way soldiers speak of a friend who had proven himself under fire. Loud, temperamental, but utterly dependable. It was a rifle that had entered war as a theory and emerged as legend. The FG-42 was born as a desperate experiment, but its geometry became prophecy. Conceived for a narrow tactical niche, the weapon of a paratrooper cut off from his heavy guns, it accidentally defined the shape of all modern rifles. It was not mass-produced, nor strategically decisive, yet its layout, proportions, and internal logic became the unseen skeleton beneath every serious infantry arm of the next 80 years. The engineers at Solingen had not only built a rifle, they had drafted a blueprint for the future. The FG-42's most radical idea was its inline recoil path, the straight relationship between bore, bolt, stock, and shooter's shoulder. This simple alignment seems obvious today, but in 1942 it was an affront to tradition. The Mauser 98K, Lee Enfield, and Springfield rifles of the world all bore their barrels high above a stock that dropped sharply downward. The shooter's shoulder sat low, so each shot imparted recoil upward, rotating the muzzle like a lever arm. Automatic fire magnified this into chaos. Muzzle rise, loss of sight picture, and wasted rounds. Stange's solution was an act of geometry. He drew a line from the chamber to the butt plate and simply refused to break it. Recoil would travel directly into the body, not over it. The result was a push, not a flip. This required raising the sights and straightening the stock, which looked ungainly to eyes trained on elegant hunting rifles. But it worked. The FG-42 did not buck or twist. It drove straight back, letting trained men deliver tight bursts at full power. That geometry would later reappear, consciously or not, in almost every successful rifle that followed. The STG-44, the world's first true assault rifle, lowered its stock to meet the line of recoil. The FNFAL, AR-10, and AR-15/M16 families adopted the same principle outright. The FAL's designers at Fabrique Nationale openly studied captured FG-42s. Armalite's Eugene Stoner internalized the same logic. A straight-line stock with a buffer tube behind the bolt carrier, recoil spring centered on the bore. The modern rifle silhouette, long, straight, with optics perched high, is a direct descendant of Stange's insight. Once the stock was straightened, the shooter's face had to rise. Stange responded with high sights, first mechanical, then optical, mounted well above the bore axis. Critics mocked it at the time. The rifle's sight line looked awkwardly tall, almost toy-like compared to the low comb of a Mauser. But the human head, as Stange observed, is not a plank. It rests comfortably upright, eyes forward. The high sight line let a paratrooper keep his head vertical and shoulders level while aiming, an ergonomic advantage that soldiers would rediscover decades later when optics became standard. The high sight line also had a side effect of profound consequence. It created space for optics. The FG-42's receiver geometry allowed a ZF-44 by scope to sit naturally on the center line without contortion. It was, in effect, the first general-issue infantry rifle designed to welcome an optical sight as part of its concept, not as an afterthought. Today, every modern rifle, from the M4 carbine to the HK-416 and FNS-CAR, assumes the presence of optics. Rails, risers, and co-witnessed sights all trace their lineage to a wartime weapon that dared to raise its head above convention. The FG-42's multi-baffle muzzle brake was another revelation disguised as brute force. German engineers had used compensators before, but always as accessories to tame recoil in machine guns or anti-tank rifles. Stange's brake was not optional, it was integral to the weapon's function. Its baffles redirected gases sideways and slightly rearward, converting what had been waste energy into counterforce. The result was a controllable burst pattern, an essential prerequisite for any select fire rifle firing full-power ammunition. That principle became doctrine. Every post-war battle rifle, the FNFAL, G3, M14, featured some variant of a muzzle device to moderate climb and recoil. When lighter intermediate cartridges, like the 7.62 by 39 and 5.56 by 45, arrived, the same concept scaled down into flash hiders with compensating cuts and ports. Modern brakes, suppressors, and hybrid devices still play out Stange's logic. Control the muzzle, and you control the fight. Of all its mechanical marvels, none was more audacious than the FG-42's two-stage fire control system. In semi-automatic mode, it fired from a closed bolt, locking up tight for precision, stability, and minimal delay between trigger and shot. In full automatic, it fired from an open bolt, keeping the chamber cool and preventing cook-offs during sustained bursts. This dual personality demanded extraordinary engineering, a sear system that could alternate between two starting positions without confusing the mechanism. No rifle before it had done so reliably. To the Fallschirmjäger, the effect was miraculous. The first shot landed exactly where it was aimed, and the next burst didn't melt the gun. No later rifle duplicated this system wholesale. It was complex and expensive, but its philosophy survived in a subtler way. The idea that a rifle should change its behavior with the mission became foundational to post-war design. Select fire triggers, variable rate gas systems, and modular fire controls all stem from the same instinct. The rifle should be both marksman's tool and support weapon depending on context. Stange's mechanical duality became a conceptual one for generations. When the FG-42 entered combat, it was intended for a small fraternity of elite troops. Yet its configuration looked suspiciously like a general-purpose infantry rifle, a gun that could fulfill all roles at once. It fired the full-power cartridge of the MG-42, served as a precision rifle with a scope, and delivered automatic fire when needed. It was not yet the assault rifle in the modern sense. The ammunition was too strong for controllable full auto, but it was the first to blur the boundaries. That blurring became the central design question of the post-war era. The STG-44 answered it by stepping down to an intermediate cartridge, keeping the FG-42's inline form, but optimizing it for controllable bursts. The FN-FAL and G3 pursued the opposite path, scaling up the FG-42's ergonomics for NATO's 7.62 by 51 mm round. The M14 combined a Garand's internals with the FG-42's linear stock and muzzle brake. Even the M60 machine gun, derived partly from FG-42 mechanics, carried the same bolt and trigger lineage. By the 1950s, the FG-42's DNA was everywhere. Its silhouette, straight stock, high sights, side-mounted gas system, had become the archetype. Its once odd ergonomics were now the professional standard. What Stange accomplished, though couched in wartime necessity, was to harmonize the physics of a weapon with the physiology of a soldier. The recoil line matched the skeletal line, the sight plane matched the natural head position, the trigger system matched the rhythm of combat. In doing so, he invented not merely a weapon, but a grammar of design. Every modern rifle still speaks that language. When a soldier today shoulders an M4, the recoil drives straight back. His eye meets an optic set high above the bore. His muzzle device flattens the impulse. His fire selector toggles from precision to suppression, all unconscious echoes of a rifle built for men who dropped from the sky over Crete and Casino. Few FG-42s survived the war. Only a few thousand were built, and fewer still reached front lines. yet its spirit proliferated faster than its serial numbers. It taught the world's ordnance designers that form follows function not by accident but by calculation, that the geometry of recoil, not the poetry of aesthetics, determines the fate of bullets and men. The FG-42 never won Germany a battle, but it won the future its vocabulary. From Sollingen's drawing boards came the modern rifle's 3 commandments: keep the line straight, keep the sights high, and build one weapon that can do them all. In the winter of 1942, Louis Stange had been asked for a rifle for parachutists. What he delivered was a geometry for civilization's next century of war, a weapon so far ahead of its time that even its imitators needed a decade to catch up. When engineers today draw a rifle's profile, they still trace, however faintly, the same straight line that began with the FG-42. When the fighting stopped and the smoke thinned, Allied ordnance officers did what militaries always do. They put enemy hardware on a bench and asked blunt questions. What works? What breaks? What ideas are worth stealing? Among the crates that reached US depots in 1945 were FG-42s, odd, elegant and intolerably efficient weapons from a very particular German problem set. Give one man the firepower of a squad. The Ordnance Corps tore them apart and, as with any good theft, reassembled the useful bits into a different language. The first American fruit of that labours was not the M60 itself, but a sequence of test beds, the T-44 and T-52 families. The T-44 began life as a kind of Americanized FG-42, a Type II pattern grafted with a German-style feed cover and other experiments, and it became the crucible where engineers translated the FG's mechanical grammar into US manufacturing logic. The historical record from Army Ordnance archives and later summaries is plain. Captured FG-42 features were studied, adapted and tested in the T-44/T-52 program that led toward the M60. What exactly did American engineers lift from Sollingen's drawings, and what did they leave on the cutting room floor? The influence is best read in 3 parts: the operating system, the layout and ergonomics, and the feed barrel management philosophy. First, the operating heart. The FG-42's bolt operating rod arrangement, itself a long-stroke gas-operated system with a rotating bolt inspired in part by earlier Lewis gun concepts, delighted technicians because it combined robustness with a compact action that could sit partly within the stock. US designers borrowed this notion. An operating rod turning a rotating bolt appears as a direct ancestor in the T-44/T-52 prototypes and survives, conceptually, if not identically, in the M60's action. The rod-to-rotating bolt lineage is the clearest mechanical echo from FG-42 to American designs. Second, the FG-42 taught an entire vocabulary of ergonomics. Its straight-line layout, the bore, recoil path, and stock aligned so recoil becomes a shove rather than a pitch, and its adoption of pistol grip styling, raised sight plane, and forward handguard suggested a portable general-purpose weapon rather than a pure rifle or a pure machine gun. The T-52E3 prototypes and the eventual M60 adopted that operator-friendly posture, a pistol grip, a stock that placed the action closer to the shoulder, and controls arranged for rapid manipulation under stress. In form, the M60 can feel like a transatlantic accent of the FG, American aluminum and stamping, but with postures, grips, and a centre of mass that echo the German original. Third, and perhaps most consequential, was the marriage of FG-42 concept to MG-42 feeding philosophy. The Germans had solved sustained fire with the MG-42, stamped construction, rapid cyclic rates, and belt feed. US planners wanted a single weapon to serve both the squad auto and the sustained fire roles, a general-purpose machine gun. So the prototype sequence grafted the MG-42's feed and quick-change barrel concepts onto mechanisms that showed FG-42 lineage in their bolt operating geometry. In the T-44 and later T-52 experiments, the MG-42 style feed and quick-change barrel were mixed with FG-derived actions. The M60 emerged as the American synthesis, FG-42 heart, MG-42 feeding instincts. But the lineage is not a clean copy. What American engineers discarded often tells as much as what they kept. The FG-42's hybrid closed-bolt/semi-open bolt fire control, brilliant for a select-fire infantry rifle, allowing precision first shots and safer automatic bursts, was a complex, delicate dance that required careful manufacture and maintenance. The M60, conceived as a full automatic belt-fed general-purpose weapon, dispensed with that two-mode firing compromise in favour of a simpler, single-mode open-bolt operation for cooling and simplicity in sustained fire. The M60 also abandoned the FG-42's side-mounted magazine logic, perfect for a paratrooper's prone reloads, in favour of the belt feed required for prolonged support. In short, Americans kept the FG's actional architecture and ergonomics, but chose durability, manufacturability, and role-centric features over the FG's more surgical hybridities. The result is a machine that feels like the FG-42 even as it behaves like an American machine gun. The M60's balance, the way the action sits inside a shoulder-friendly profile, and the presence of a pistol grip and handguard are all visual and tactile descendants. But the performance priorities shift. Where the FG prioritized individual controllable bursts from a full-power cartridge, the M60 prioritized sustained belt-fed suppression with quick barrel changes and simplified internals, the logic of support rather than precision marksmanry. This brings us to the second half of the story, bridging Mauser and the intermediate cartridge revolution. The FG-42 was a transitional animal. It was designed to fire the full-power 7.92 by 57mm Mauser round, which gave it penetration and reach, qualities prized in 1942 when doctrine still assumed long-range rifle engagements. But the recoil and logistics penalties of full-power rifling made controllable automatic fire difficult. That paradox fed two simultaneous revolutions, one German, one Allied. Germany answered by leaning into intermediate rounds in the STG-44, a shorter cartridge that made controllable automatic fire with a shoulder weapon realistic at squad level. The FG-42, meanwhile, showed that geometry and mechanism could mitigate recoil sufficiently to make full-power automatic fire usable in a limited role. Post-war designers absorbed both lessons. The FG-42's inline geometry taught how to handle recoil. The STG-44 taught when to reduce recoil through cartridge design. US post-war doctrine split the difference for some time. The M14 and many early NATO choices kept full-power cartridges for reach and barrier performance, while the later move to intermediate 5.56 by 45 in the AR-15 family accepted the assault rifle payload and rate of fire compromise. The M60 sits with 1 foot in each world, an American machine gun that carries the FG-42's anatomy, but fires a full-power NATO cartridge in sustained rolls, while doctrine evolved around lighter intermediate concepts for infantry rifles. In short, the FG-42 supplied a grammar: operating rod/rotating bolt robustness, straight-line ergonomics, and select-fire ambition. US engineers translated that grammar into the language of mass production, belt feed, and sustained fire, and the M60 rose as a transatlantic dialect, German syntax with American phonetics. The weapon that followed was not a copy, but a conversation, a war-era lesson in steel that crossed oceans and languages, and in doing so shaped the next generation of small arms thinking. There are moments in weapons history that look accidental until you hold them against the longer thread of doctrine and see how neatly they stitch two different worlds together. The FG-42 is one of those seams. Forged to answer an immediate, brutal need for parachute troops, it nonetheless occupied the technical and tactical hinge between the old age of full-power Mauser cartridges and the new experiment in intermediate ammunition embodied by the STG-44. In 1942–43, a single paratrooper's rifle quietly rehearsed ideas that would become doctrine. How much a man can control, what a squad needs to hit, and how roles inside a rifle squad could be rethought. The FG-42 did not invent the intermediate cartridge, but it taught armies how to think about controllability, hit probability, and the designated marksman long before those words entered official manuals. To understand the paradox, start with the cartridge. In 1942, the German army still conceived combat in ranges and terms that prized reach, fieldworks, interdiction at several hundred meters, and the destructive politics of long-range fire. The standard rifle round, the 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser, offered energy, penetration, and an ability to defeat cover at ranges that mattered in open country. It was the logic of empire and maneuver. If you could strike farther, you could shape the battle before messy close fighting began. But that logic contained a practical cost: recoil. Full-power cartridges exert forces on the shooter that make controllable automatic fire from the shoulder difficult, often impossible, unless geometry and muzzle control are used to tame the impulse. At Crete, the Fallschirmjäger had learned that pistol-caliber SMGs couldn't reach or stop properly protected infantry, and that machine guns didn't arrive when needed. Their mission profile, seize an objective and hold against counterattack until relief arrived, demanded a rifle that combined reach with volume. Hence the FG-42, a full-power select-fire rifle that attempted to make automatic fire usable by one man through clever geometry, inline recoil, path, muzzle devices, and a hybrid firing system. It was the engineering answer to a tactical problem. Give the paratrooper the reach of a Mauser and the short-term suppressive power of a light machine gun without requiring a crew. Meanwhile, elsewhere in German arms development, another answer was growing in the laboratories and on the Eastern Front. Combat at Stalingrad and the close attritional fights on the Eastern Steppe made clear that most actual infantry engagements happened at closer ranges, 0 to 300 meters, where volume, control, and hit probability trumped the raw range of a full-power cartridge. The STG-44's 7.92 by 33 mm quirks was the doctrinal pivot, an intermediate round that drastically reduced recoil impulse while preserving lethality in the ranges that counted for most squad fights. It accepted a lower maximum range in exchange for controllable full auto from the shoulder and higher sustained hit probability under fire, and it rewired how squads could be organized and employed in combined arms warfare. So why did the Fallschirmjäger get a full-power select-fire rifle while the rest moved toward intermediate cartridges? The reasons are tactical, logistical, and institutional. First, mission profile. Airborne troops were expected to operate in isolation, often in terrain that presented long sight lines, airfields, ridgelines, bridges. They could not rely on resupply from nearby formations and had to be able to pick up captured ammunition or use what they had and what they could seize. Issuing them a full-power round meant they could fight at longer reach when needed and use enemy stockpiles if they captured an enemy position. Second, institutional inertia favored keeping standard cartridges for elite units where supply chains might be simplified rather than fragmented. Changing calibers for small specialized forces added complexity during wartime. And third, the FG-42's innovative engineering made full-power automatic fire more practical than it would have been otherwise. So for a slender elite force, the design trade-offs were defensible. But the FG-42's most important lesson was not that a man could be given a machine gun in rifle form. It was that how a weapon transmits force to a human body profoundly changes what that human can reliably do under stress. The FG-42's inline stock and muzzle brake reduced climb, the high sight plane sped first-round hits, and the hybrid bolt preserved accuracy while letting automatic fire be used for suppression without cooking barrels into failure. In short, the rifle increased hit probability in two ways. It made the first shot faster and more accurate, and it made short bursts useful instead of random. Hit probability is not merely a function of projectile energy or sight picture. It is the product of ergonomics, recoil management, sighting, and training. The FG-42 improved all of those variables for the individual shooter. That refinement gave birth, quietly and mechanically, to what would later be called DMR logic. The idea that within a squad you need a rifleman equipped and tasked to deliver precision at extended ranges while being able to deliver bursts when necessary. The FG-42 could be a designated marksman's tool, fitted with optics and used for scalpel-like precision at 400 meters, then switched to controlled bursts to repel an assault. This duality is the root of the DMR concept, a weapon that occupies the middle ground between a general-issue rifle and a light machine gun, optimized for hit probability and versatility rather than pure volume. Post-war developments show the bifurcation of the lessons the FG-42 taught. The STG-44 revised doctrinal assumptions around cartridge power. Make the rifle round lighter, and you will free squad tactics to emphasize controllable automatic fire and closer, more lethal engagements. The Allies and later NATO wrestled with the trade-offs. Early post-war Western choices like the FNFAL and M14 kept full-power cartridges for reach and barrier penetration, while the later move toward the 5.56 by 45 mm in the AR family accepted the assault rifle compromise: lighter rounds, more controllable semi and full auto, and higher hit rates in typical engagement ranges. Through all of this, the FG-42's geometry remained a constant mentor. Regardless of caliber, designers learned that ergonomics and recoil path dramatically affect what a soldier can do with a given cartridge. The FG-42's unique position, built for a specific elite role but embodying universal ergonomics, made it a hinge connecting two revolutions. It validated the idea that full-power rounds could be tamed by human-centric design and taught that raw cartridge power was not the only route to lethality. Conversely, the STG-44's success showed that changing the cartridge could make the weapon's job easier in the common case. Together, they forced a recognition. Lethality is a systems problem, not merely a ballistics one. The rifle, the round, the human, the doctrine, all must be designed in conversation. In the end, the FG-42 was less a final answer than a question posed with force. Given the right geometry and controls, what can one man reasonably be expected to do with a weapon? The century that followed answered with a plurality of solutions: intermediate rounds, designated marksmen, modular assault rifles. But the conversation began in a Solingen workshop and was answered on the broken roads of Crete, Cassino, and Normandy. The FG-42 bridged two revolutions by forcing the military mind to ask a simpler, more useful question. Not how much power can we put in the barrel, but how much of that power can a man bring to bear where it matters? Rifles do not rise in isolation. They are answers in metal to problems first posed by other men, other battles, other failures. The FG-42 was one of those questions asked so directly that later designers, consciously or not, found themselves echoing its grammar. Look at the post-war families: the FNFAL, Heckler and Koch G3, Armalite's AR-10/AR-15 lineage, and you will see the fingerprint of Solingen: stock-to-bore alignment, attention to muzzle behavior, sight height that assumes optical devices, and an increasing hunger for modular attachments. These are not aesthetic choices, but ergonomic translations of the same human problem the FG-42 was built to solve: make a man more effective with his weapon. Start with the spine, stock-to-bore alignment. The FG-42 forced designers to accept that recoil must be a shove, not a rotation. Early post-war battle rifles partially embraced this by lowering the bore relative to the shooter's shoulder, or by incorporating straight-line elements into stocks and buffer systems. The FAL and G3, each born of different industrial traditions, nonetheless put the operator's centre of mass closer to the action. The AR family formalised it further by placing the recoil spring and buffer directly behind the bolt carrier, creating a natural straight-line recoil path. This lineage made follow-up shots faster and reduced the vertical dispersion that plagued earlier full-power select-fire attempts. Muzzle compensation, the FG-42's multi-baffle brake, left its own legacy. Battle rifles of the early Cold War often relied on raw weight and a long gas system to absorb recoil. Many still suffered from muzzle climb under rapid fire. Only later did compensators and hybrid devices appear that accepted the FG's thesis: control the muzzle and you control the burst. Modern brakes and compensators, from three-port designs to multi-baffle hybrids, owe their behavioral DNA to that original compromise: brutal lateral blast in service of stability. As designs matured, engineers learned to temper the secondary effects, noise and concussion, while retaining bite, and the result appears in the SCARH's tuned compensator and the refined muzzle devices on HK's modern rifles. A second echo is sight height and optical readiness. The FG-42's elevated sight plane was functional, an ergonomic concession to the straight stock that also created real estate for optics. Post-war rifles followed. Picatinny rails, risers, and integral carry handles with apertures were industry attempts to make optical co-witnessing and rapid target acquisition standard. The AR-10/15's flat-top receivers and the FAL/G3 variants with optics mounts showed a new expectation. The rifle would be used with glass as a matter of course. That cultural shift began, in part, with a rifle that made optics a natural fit, not an add-on. Ambidexterity and modular attachments are quieter echoes. The FG-42's layout, pistol grip, handguard, bipod and controls placed with the operator in mind, made the weapon more usable in cramped, mobile or unorthodox positions. Later, Western designs institutionalized that sensibility. Modern rifles are born with sling points, ambidextrous safety selectors, reversible charging handles, and quick-attach bipod sockets as baseline features. The logic is the same. An infantryman must manipulate triggers, sights, supports, and balance without contorting his body away from the natural line of fire. The FG-42 rehearsed that ergonomics. Later engineers simply put it into production-friendly alloys and polymers. Why then did many battle rifles, the FAL, G3, M14, struggle to control recoil, especially in rapid or automatic fire? The answer lies at the intersection of cartridge, mechanism, and industrial compromise. These weapons were mostly conceived around full-power cartridges and were often heavy by necessity, but weight alone cannot replace geometry. Many designs used gas systems and long-stroke pistons that generated robust impulse, but also complex moment arms. Their stocks and buffer arrangements were not always optimized to channel recoil through the shooter's skeletal axis. Manufacturing economies and doctrine, which initially prized semi-auto accuracy and long-range reach, led engineers to accept some vertical climb as an operational cost. It took the war's lessons and the FG-42's demonstration to show that ergonomics, not mass alone, governed controllability. The late 20th century remedies were therefore both mechanical and conceptual. The SCAR-H, HK416/417, and other modern systems grafted FG like thinking onto contemporary materials. Short-stroke gas systems tuned to reduce carrier movement, internal buffers and optimized receiver geometry, and muzzle devices specifically engineered to reduce climb without catastrophic side blast. HK's piston work on the 416/417 improved reliability while allowing for tuned recoil characteristics. FN's SCAR program prioritized modularity, so compensators, suppressors and stocks could be swapped to restore the desired recoil line for any mission. These are iterative acknowledgements of the same truth Stange discovered in Solingen. If you want a man to put rounds where they matter, build the rifle around how his body works, and then refine the parts that force it to misbehave, muzzle and gas. Finally, the FG-42's influence appears most clearly in modern modularity. Where Solingen offered a single integrated solution, the late Cold War and post-Cold War era gave soldiers the ability to tailor weapons to tasks, barrels, optics, grips, compensators, each an attempt to recreate under different constraints the FG's single-weapon versatility. The result? An ecosystem where the same basic platform can be configured as a marksman's tool, a patrol rifle, or a suppressive fire support system. That was the FG-42's original promise, realized at scale and in aluminum and polymer rather than stamped German steel. By any industrial measure, the FG-42 was a statistical anomaly. Only a few thousand were ever made, roughly 7,000 to 8,000 across all variants, scattered between late 1942 and the final months of 1944. Production was fragmented across firms like Crete and Rheinmetall, hampered by shortages of alloy steel, competing priorities, and the collapse of Germany's wartime economy. It never reached mass issue. Whole divisions of Fallschirmjäger never saw one. Yet its limited production belies an oversized legacy. The FG-42 became one of the most studied rifles of the 20th century, not for what it accomplished on the battlefield, but for what it revealed about how rifles could be designed around people rather than around ammunition. The FG-42 was, in essence, an idea cast in steel. It fused roles once thought irreconcilable: a paratrooper's compactness, a rifleman's reach, and a machine gunner's fire volume, into one weapon through geometry, not gimmickry. Its straight-line stock tamed recoil by channeling energy directly into the shoulder. Its raised sight plane made first-round hits faster and allowed optical sights to sit naturally. Its muzzle brake and bipod made bursts practical. And its two-mode fire system, closed bolt for precision, open bolt for automatic, preserved accuracy and barrel life. Each feature spoke to a single insight: controllability, not mere power, decides what a soldier can actually do with a rifle. That human-centered logic became the invisible grammar of post-war design. When American engineers examined captured FG-42s at Aberdeen and Springfield Armory, they saw a blueprint for future recoil management. The FG's operating rod and bolt lineage migrated into experimental test beds and eventually reappeared, transformed, in the M60 machine gun, a hybrid of German ideas rendered in American aluminum. Across the Atlantic, designers at Fabrique Nationale, Heckler & Koch, and Armalite absorbed the same lesson. The FNFAL, G3, and AR-10 families all adopted the FG's straight-line recoil path and its respect for sight alignment and shooter ergonomics. By the time the AR-15 matured into the M16, the FG-42's design language, low muzzle climb, high sight line, modular sighting surfaces, had become orthodoxy. Its conceptual reach extended further still. The FG-42 anticipated what modern armies would call role flexibility. It could serve as a marksman's rifle one moment and a suppressive fire weapon the next. That philosophy, one gun bridging the gap between rifle and light machine gun, prefigured the designated marksman role and the modular family approach that defines weapons like the SCAR-H and HK-417 today. It proved that a rifle could be designed not just for a caliber, but for the complex choreography of modern squads. Seen this way, the FG-42 was less a weapon of its time than a rehearsal for the next century of small arms. Its production numbers were small, its influence enormous. Each surviving example, those few in museums or private collections, stands as evidence of a pivotal shift, from the age of powerful cartridges to the age of ergonomic understanding. The Fallschirmjäger's rifle never changed the outcome of the war, but it changed how every army afterward thought about how a man, a mechanism, and recoil could work together. In that harmony, the rifle that rehearsed tomorrow still speaks.